to this new interview for KCrush American Magazine. I'm your host, Carolyn Hinds, film critic and journalist, and this is the interview with writer and director Fawzia Mirza to talk about her film, The Queen of My Dreams, in color, which premiered at the 2023 Toronto International Film Festival, but has been screening at many international film festivals around the world, as well as here in Toronto, where I am speaking with Fawzia today. I'm so happy to have Fawzia join me to talk about this film because it's a very interesting film about mothers and daughters and culture and heritage and loss and grief, and independence and learning who you are as a daughter, but also who you are as a mother and discovering those two things together. And I really enjoy this film. And I think it's a really good look at how daughters think they know everything about their mothers and then grow up and realize, no, they don't. Because there's so much more to their mothers than meets the eye, more than their mothers tell them. There's so many things that mothers don't tell their daughters and so many things that daughters don't tell their mothers. And I think the film is very much about that. And it's about reconciliation and forgiveness and, an apology. It's very important to apologize. We actually get mothers apologizing in this film. So I think that's really one of my favorite things about this, having an acknowledgement of hurt and apologies for that. But thank you so much. But I'm joined here today by Fawzia to talk about this. So this isn't a video interview. This is going to be just audio. So you just hear us talking, but I put up pictures of the film to go along with it. But thank you so much to Fawzia for joining me today. My first question for you, Fawzia. First of all, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me about the film. I've seen it 2.5 times so far now.
Amazing.
And I really love it. I love that it's a film about mothers and daughters, but I think in a way that isn't generally shown on film. It's a film about mothers and daughters and the relationship to culture and history and country and the idea of identity tied to those things. So first of all, tell me about The Queen of My Dreams, small caps in color. I thought I auditioned at the film was interesting in the title. So first of all, tell me about adding the in color part. I was wondering if that has to tie into with the fact that the film is kind of like an homage, I think, to old Bollywood films in Technicolor. And so talk to me about the title of the film, first of all.
Yeah, the title of the film, it is a bit of a reference to the song in a very famous 1969 film called Radhana. And in that film, there is that use of the word in color. And it is, I think this film is a memory film, and it is a film that sort of centers a lot of nostalgia. And I believe that, the past is the present is the future, and history repeats itself. And in order to understand ourselves, we have to look to the past. In order to be better in the future, we have to look at the past and understand the past. And so the in color is a bit of an homage to a literal reference, and I think a bit of a metaphor as well.
It is, and like you just mentioned about like how the old adage of like to understand our future we have to understand our past and where we came from, and that's used a lot in regards to like relationships, like parents and children. Like if you don't want your child to have to struggle the way you did, look back to your past and correct the mistakes that your own parents made with you. And this film is kind of like that because it's about the relationship between the characters of Azra, played by Amit Kaur, and her mother. And Azra is an interesting character because she is a reflection of her mother.
Yeah.
And she's a reflection of her mother, and the fact that I thought you did so brilliantly is you have her playing the younger version of her own mother, Miriam, and then you have the older version of Miriam playing herself. And the film is kind of like we're like mirror images of our parents, not necessarily physically but emotionally, but also I think with regards to like the way we speak, the things we do. Like I sound just like my mom on the phone,
Totally.
And now that I'm getting older, I can see parts of me that look like my mom. Totally. I can see my mom in my face now. And I think the film is talking about that, where like, yes, we always say like you gotta break cycles, but there's some cycles we can't break, like genetic cycles, the way you look, the way you talk about your parents, the history that you have. So talk about that aspect of the film, because I think that's like the main foundation of the film. Like we can't really run from our past, no matter how hard we try.
Oh my God, I mean, definitely, like, there is this literalization of the mother is the daughter, is the grandmother. And I think their DNA, those who came before us, our family, our ancestors, their experiences are imprinted on us, whether we know it or not, whether we see it or not. And their joys and traumas are in us as well. And then, of course, there's the way we look as well. But I wanted to literalize that. And, you know, I kind of hear you, like, I think when we're younger, we're like, I'm not like my mom, or I'm not like my dad. Or it's like we only want to, we sort of cherry pick the things we are and are not like, and we're always pushing against it. But I think there, in my sort of coming into wisdom, it's why run from it? Why not embrace it? And I think by embracing it and seeing how connected we are to where we come from and who we come from, the more we can love ourselves. And I really believe the more we love ourselves, the better we are in the world, and the better we can love other people.
And you said something very interesting.
And be in our power.
No, for sure. And you said something very interesting there that I kind of been subconsciously thinking about with regards to like my own relationship to my parents, especially my mom, is like, we sometimes think we're better than our parents because we're like the modern generation, you know, we're contemporary, our parents are more old school, and a lot of that has to do with the way we think. For instance, like cherry pick things that we want to like look like our parents. Like I have my dad's nose, and I used to hate my nose because it was broad, and I used to get teased about that, but also because my dad and I, we have like a kind of like a contentious relationship, and so I used to really focus on my nose and like say like I wish I didn't have my dad's nose. And it was only as I got older that I kind of looked at it as my nose as being like a symbol of me having that connection to my dad, and I couldn't get from it. And I think the film, like Azra kind of has that same thing with her mom, where she looks like her mom. She looks like her mom. She has the same hobbies as her mom. Like she went into film because of the relationship she has with her mom, and her mom instilled that love of film and theatrics and drama in her. But it's created this contention between them now because of how her mom became such a devout Muslim, and she looked at as films as kind of like something that as a devout Muslim woman she's not supposed to love. Right. So like that kind of created a distance between them. So like there's this contention between them with this one thing that they have, which is film. And I thought it was interesting because like you start out the film with Azra showing her girlfriend the very same film that her mom showed her as a child, that instilled the love of film and acting and Bollywood films into her. So talk to me first. I thought it was so interesting that this film, this Sharmila Tagore film, is such, I think, intrinsic part of the film. I kind of see it as like the screw that ties it all together, you know, because you interject scenes into it, and then like there's flashbacks with these like Miriam and Azra seeing herself as Sharmila's character. So talk to me about using film as like the bond between the mother and the daughter, but also the thing that creates a schism between them.
Yeah, I mean the film. I mean, there's so much that is like the reference. It's a reference to a reference sometimes, and there's a bit of a film within a film. It's interesting because the actress who plays the Sharmila Tagore, the actress in that sort of referenced film Aradhana, you know, she's a touchstone, you know, for mothers. And I don't know, sometimes I think about, well, what if our mothers didn't move here? What might they be like? And it's like, oh, well, maybe they'd be like Sharmila Tagore. If they stayed in their country, they would be different. Whatever that means, you know. For me, it was more liberal or fun or accepting of gay people. But different. You know, it could mean something different for everybody. So that was something that really struck me about the film. And in terms of really referencing the film, like scenes, I really found that in the edit process. You know, I was looking for something to stitch the story together in a more and sort of, I was looking for something to stitch the film together that that I hadn't found yet, and it was something that was used in my first short film, The Queen of My Dreams, which is a 3-minute short film I made in 2012. And I kind of went back to that and watched it, and I was like, what strikes me about this? And some of this is that, there's so many layers of nostalgia that I wanted to evoke and that I was trying to evoke in the movie, through nostalgia through the song, nostalgia through other songs, nostalgia through different time periods and wardrobe and hair, and then nostalgia. When I went back and looked at the short film, it felt like there's nostalgia in that old movie itself. Even in the way it's shot, in color, in Technicolor. It meant something then, to all of us. And even when we look at it, it means something. It has a place in film history, but in all of our histories, our family's history. So it was something I found later in the process, and I can't imagine the movie without it.
Me either, because I think it's like a perfect. It's a perfect timeless touchstone in the film. And the thing is about films in Technicolor, which is so interesting, whether it's a Bollywood film, a Hollywood film, a film from from the East Asia or whatever. We watch them now, and though the color grading looks a bit older because of the technology then, they still resonate with us. Whereas where I feel like for modern day films, some of them won't age very well because they've been so touched up and brushed up and made to look a certain way, perfect and specifically, that in 10, 20 years, we'll look back and say, boy, this film has not aged well visually. Whereas for films like the one in the film, it fits perfectly.
Well, and not just the visual fit perfectly. It's like the themes that people were going through in the 1960s, those themes have not changed.
No, we all looking for love.
It doesn't matter who we think we are. We're still going through the same shit.
Exactly.
The same stuff. And so that, when I went back, and in that really resonated. And I rewatched the film and, made a spreadsheet of all the moments that resonated with this movie. And it was wild how many moments from that film just felt like they could play in this movie. And so it was also like the timelessness of themes and our emotions. Like our emotions are not different just because we're in 2024.
I think that's the one thing about humanity that doesn't change, and it's our emotions. Anger is anger, no matter what age, no matter what time
struggle.
It is,
parents
right?
are parents. Like it's still we're cyclical. It's a cyclical. Our emotion, our experiences are cyclical, and so are our emotions.
And that's demonstrated in the film. There's a particular scene, and you use it first of all in the editing. I love how you edit this film because there's two different types. There's
Simone Smith, my incredible editor.
Kudos to
she's a hero.
Kudos to her, because there's different types of editing styles used for different parts of the film and to tell different stories. Like some reminded me of those old, I couldn't look for the name of the machine exactly, but you went into the libraries back in the day, like the projectors,
slideshows,
the slideshow projectors, right? There was that. And it fit because it's moving left to right, and then there's some where the editing, it flickers in and out like a movie reel that's flickering, or even like a record scratching. And I like that there's different editing styles and different ways of transitioning the shots, because it keeps the momentum of the film going, but it also it kind of spoke to the identity of the film being about different characters, and everyone has their own way of entering in and out of situations.
I love that.
And another thing, you talked about cyclical, and how relationships with mothers are cyclical. It doesn't change. Rather, from 200 years, 300 years, 70 years ago, there's a conversation with Miriam's mom when they're in the courtyard and she's playing chess with her dad, and the mother references giving birth to her, and she's like, they cut me open she's like, in order to get you, they had to cut me open, and she compared it to the partition between India and Pakistan. And I thought it was such an interesting comparison to me, because she was like, giving birth to you changed my life irrevocably. I'm not who I once was. And she compared it to the country, the country is no longer what it was after partition, after that separation, and you go forward, and it's echoing the scene at the beginning with the old lady in the airplane where she's like, there is a change, dramatic change in 1969 and 70, but we have to keep moving forward. We have to keep progressing.
Yeah.
So I kind of saw like that scene in the airplane kind of echoed by the discussion that Miriam's mom has with her. She's like, it hurt me, but I have to move forward, and in moving forward, that part of that is getting you married. And Miriam doesn't pick up on like what her mom is telling her. Her mom is telling her like, she's like, it's not that I regret giving birth to you, but like that was such a traumatic experience for me. It's changed my complete outlook on life. The way I look at you, the way I look at your father, the way I look at this country, the way I look at me, and that's what birth is. And I like that you give that acknowledgement to what giving birth means to mother, you know. And I like that you put that into the film.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think you know, there's definitely. It's really hard to talk about, you know, the subcontinent without referencing partition and colonization, and I think that's true of many countries around the world.
England was doing its thing,
and hurting everybody, and we're seeing you know, we're seeing England, we're seeing the awful ramifications of England doing its thing with what's happening in Gaza today. And so I think it's hard to think of the past of South Asia without thinking of partition. And I think, you know, whether the way someone treats us is right or not, or appropriate or not, or good or not, they had their struggle. And we don't know what happened to them. You know, it's like if I were to make another movie, there's probably a whole series to be made about what, you know, Mariam's mom's life was, and what she went through as a baby partitioning, and like what a baby experiences going through such trauma. But that's, you know, there's so much to explore there, but it feels like I didn't know. I didn't want to. You know, this movie. What I realized in part of the writing process was I couldn't go into it all, the politics of that too much, without it feeling like it was wanting. And so I was really intentional about how I referenced partition, and so that was something that felt like it was a way to honor all of those births.
Like, I'm not Pakistani and I'm not from India, so I don't have that personal reference to it. But what I think you did is like you did to me a phenomenal job paying respect to that by acknowledging it first, but then also making sure that you showed what that did to women from the female perspective. You know, because something that was so interesting to me, and when I watched the film the first time, I was like, there's something that's sticking at the back of my head, and then I rewatched it yesterday, I was like, okay, I got it. The film kind of shows us how no matter how society changes, the ones that it really impacts the most are women, because women always have to adjust the way, if it becomes more conservative, we have to change the way we dress, we have to change the way we speak, how we approach marriage, you know, how we deal with marriage and giving birth and having children, whereas men don't really have to adjust themselves. You know, like I found like the way that Miriam, she changed herself because of her relationship, how her relationship to Islam changed, but then how her relationship to her identity as a Pakistani woman living in Pakistan, but then living in Nova Scotia of all places. She had to change her identity that way.
So
whereas her husband didn't have to change anything.
No, he was just doing his thing.
And then there's these men, the singers, who are like, they were there when her mom was there as a kid, and as a teenager, and then as a young woman. But then when Azra goes back, they're there again. I'm like, they don't get to change. They're still there in the same place, singing their songs, where like the world around them has changed. And I'm like, that's kind of like how it is for men. I'm like, men get to be men. Well, we got to learn to adapt more.
I love that. That was part of what you experienced and saw. I mean, it is true, isn't it? Like, and truthfully, that was one of the, like, Hamza is so good as Hassan, and he's such a fantastic actor. And this isn't a movie about him. It isn't a movie about Hassan. It's a movie about the impact the world has on these women. And you know, if we were to make a movie about Hassan, we would see that, like, why wasn't he around more? you know, but like he's not just like a perfect father. But it just isn't his story. But yeah, the women do have to change. And there's something that I find so fascinating about my mother and how she was always trying to reinvent herself. It's remarkable. And these women who, I think, you know, it's still happening. We're still seeing them now, constantly trying to survive and will and have to do anything. You know, it's like, I don't know. I'm just thinking about, again, I can't help but think about the women in Gaza and just how, well, we're going to make bread out of this today.
Right, nettles and greens, and they have to learn to adapt.
They are innovating.
Yeah.
You know, they're the true innovators of our society, and I don't know, it's really, really moving that you felt that in this.
It is, and I just love that, yes, Hassan has his place in the story, because again, the actions of men affect the actions of the lives of women, because like what Marian's mother was talking about, partition started because of the politics between men, you know, like they inflicted their politics on everyone else, and women suffer the most, because I remember I had done some research on it for another film, In Flames.
Of course.
And that's another great film that shows like the impact of like politics on women in situations like this. And then I just thought, you know, how birth is such a traumatic experience for women, but it's the only way that humanity gets to progress, you know. And it's like, again, women are paying the price. And you mentioned Gaza, just like now, like I'm pro-Palestinian, but I've been doing like reading, and I look at the reels, and there's the reports of women like going through traumatic birth experiences because they don't have any anesthesia, you know, or even if like, even not even talking about birth, but women who have like, what about for women who have like PCOS? You know, and uterine conditions where there is no medication to deal with it, like there's no sanitary napkins.
Oh my God.
And women are, yes, men and boys are struggling, they're being harmed and killed, but there is a physical element that women are experiencing because of like just for the sake of being women, you know.
Of course.
Like having periods, giving birth, like there's no birth control.
Everything is harder.
And like there's all of this element on it, and there's the having to learn to adapt, you know, and like and I think like in society, there's so much that we have to learn to adapt to daily. You know, being on the street. I remember I made a tweet just the other day where leaving home is a threat, because we don't know. There's no guarantee that we won't run into some man that will expect us to smile, and if we don't smile, that is going to take that as disrespect, and it's going to physically attack us. And I'm like, that's the reality. And I was like, this is not hyperbole. I'm like, this is the reality of being a woman. This is the reality of being a young girl, a teenager in the society that we live in. And again, the film puts those things in, you know, in very specific ways. Like in the intro sequences where where Azra first arrives to Pakistan, there's a scene where the men are just living their lives, walking next to each other, playing cricket and that kind of stuff. And then there's the scenes where women they're talking, but if you notice in the background, there's a man watching them. And like there's someone that has to be there, because women can't be allowed out in public without basically a chaperone, you know. And like those kind of things are going to pass by people because they don't really think about them, because like they don't live that experience. But I'm like, I'm noticing those things because like that's a lived experience, not only for me but for other women, where we're always constantly being watched. We're always being told to have decorum, be respectful, watch the way we sit, we have etiquette, you know. And like so talk to me about just making sure you get those sequences in the film and what they mean to you, because there's all of those sequences, but then there's like like Azra being a reflection of Miriam, where Miriam has the same experience and Azra doesn't know, like buying the drink, you know, the alcoholic drink, like subversively because of prohibition. And like Azra thinks she's being over rebellious. I'm like, your mom was rebellious the same age, but you don't know.
I know.
But it's like, I
mean, there's something about like it's like we're all individuals and we're all unique, but we think we're so unique that no one has done this before.
Right.
What I'm doing is the first time it's been done, and I think that is part of the beauty of like being developing who we are and being young. But it also comes from a very like place of I, and I think as I've been sort of getting older, I'm deeply I feel I don't want to say I am desperate in some ways, but it's not a bad thing. It's like I crave the we, and to know that you are not the first is not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's like you are not alone. It means you are not alone, and there are elders, there are people who came before you, there are folks who can show you, there are people to help you. So it's a shift I think the film is in many ways this shift in the way I think, and the way I am, and the way I want to be, and what I want for all of us, which is love, compassion, healing, growth, great relationships with family and mother and mother and daughter. Yeah,
it's kind of like a hope, you're like, this 100%. Is what I hope it would be, this is
100%. It's a bit of a fantasy.
It's a fantasy, it's a dream, like the queen of my dreams. You're like, this is the queen in my dreams that I wish could become reality.
Of course, and it's like, that we find our own, like, in some ways, the scene where the grandmother offers the apology to the mother, but thinks she's offering it to,
the reflection.
Exactly, but she's offering it to the granddaughter. I mean, that apology it's not just about one person or two people. It's about generations of people, and that is the dream.
Yeah.
The dream is that we're all able to
a proper apology.
Apologize or offer forgiveness or receive love or forgiveness. So it's, the fantasy is literal in the film, but then the fantasy is also that we can find that love and compassion.
It is, because like I mentioned, I have like a bit like me. I'm so much like my parents, and I think that's one of the reasons like we have such not acrimony, because I love my parents and we love each other, but there's some things where we butt heads a lot, and a lot of it is because I am just like them. And I've told them this. I'm like, I am you, and they don't really understand what I mean. Yeah. But I'm like, and I've told my mom, I'm like, you are just like Granny, right? She's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, yes, you are. Right? And I kind of see like what you were talking about, because the scene with the grandmother apologizing, I didn't see her only as apologizing to Miriam and with Azra standing in. I saw her as Miriam apologizing to Azra, but I also saw her as apologizing to her own mother, because she for sure definitely would have had the same struggles she had with her own mother, 100%. So it's like an intergenerational 100%. Apology like that no one has ever been given.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree, and yeah, what a dream.
Isn't it? and so I want to talk about some other things that I noticed in the film that I thought were super interesting. And one of them is the representation of Chinese Pakistani. So like a lot of people, if they don't do the research and if they don't get curious and looked up and say, why is there a Chinese woman here? And I'm like, and it's because again, it's about talking about migration, and it's about the changes that people have had to make. And I like that you added in just that. It may be one scene, but I think it really shows again the diversity of Pakistan in one thing, but then also like how women again are affected by the politics of the world around them, and like and migration and immigrating is a part of that. So talk to me about making sure you added in that instance of representation, racial and ethnic representation for this.
Yeah, there's such a the way people see or know Pakistan, it's so one-dimensional. And the 60s, with the color and the vibe and the band and the music and the dancing and the fun at the clubs, like all, and the beach, like all of that shows another side. And it's not just that, it's also, there's lots of different people living in all of these, and in this community, in this country, in this culture, and all cultures, right? It's like, Chinese immigrants landed all over the world and opened a restaurant and survived and thrived and are part of the history and fabric of so many different countries. And so are many other populations. There's these two scenes where, there's a trans actress who's playing the role of the flight attendant. And, it's not about her being trans, but like, of course there are trans people everywhere. Whether you knew them to be whether they were out or not, whether they were passing or not. But it's like I really wanted to sort of build the world of Pakistan in ways that I see it, and I feel deeply aware of the Chinese population in Pakistan. Like, there's a beloved relationship. What am I trying to say here? In the stories I've heard, the Chinese restaurant is at the center of so many stories, and food is such a part of our cultures, and so it just felt like something I couldn't not share. And that restaurant we shot in is a real restaurant that's still a working restaurant, Kowloon. It's been there for many years. We dressed it up, but it's there. And the woman, the actress who played the role of Jenny, she lives in a different city in Pakistan, but when her family moved there, they did in fact also open up a restaurant, and she worked in her father's restaurant for many years. So there's this beautiful tradition and history, and I think it's again about reimagining. It's all about reimagining what we know to be the truth, and investigating what is truth, what is history, because clearly, one of the things that people say is like, I didn't know the 60s were like that in Pakistan, and I'm like, well, just think, if you didn't know that this one era in this one country wasn't like that, well, what do you really know about anything, about the history of any country around the world? I'm about any group of people. There's so much to learn, and we are so really insignificant in the greater story of the universe.
Right, but and I think it speaks to like the curiosity or lack thereof,
or lack of it,
that people have. And like when they move to Nova Scotia, you show the older ladies during the Tupperware parties, and I thought the Tupperware parties was an interesting choice, because me being in Barbados, because I'm an 83 baby, but I grew up in Barbados, and like we didn't have Tupperware parties, but we had Avon ladies. And
sure.
We had the Avon ladies.
Yeah, there were those group parties selling something.
Right? And so when I saw that, I was like, yeah, this is something I've seen. And I grew up watching a lot of North American TV, so like Tupperware parties that's how I learned what a Tupperware party is, because I was like, why are people going around selling plastic containers? And
it's so weird.
I watched a lot of American TV, and I was like, oh, okay, so it's going around just selling plastic containers. But it speaks to how, again, adaptability, and how Miriam herself learned how to adapt. And I think how Azra forgot how adaptable her mom had to be, the things that her mom had to say and do to like make money for her birthday party. Azra forgot it. And as she grew older, she took on this kind of sanctimonious ear, thinking because she went to university that her mom doesn't know anything. I'm like, your mom knew plenty,
Totally.
and
I think there's something about like, I don't know. If we want, the thing that I've come to terms with is, if I want someone to accept me for who I am, there's a point where I also have to embrace who this other person is. I'm not going to change. Not about my identity. And you might not change either. So then what? How can we, how can I have compassion for, who you are and where you're at? And so, there's something in that I think,
I do love the transition that Miriam goes through. Like, people will say, okay, she's become more harsh and whatever, but I like that you show that she's such a complex character, and that
people change.
And the reason she changed, it wasn't because she wanted to be more domineering, is that she did it out of love for her own husband. Like, her change was created out of love. She was like, okay, I surrender to you. And she was praying to Allah. And she's like, I surrender to you. She's like, if my husband lives, this is the person I'm going to become. And she's, again, imploring Azra to change while her son doesn't have to. Her son doesn't become more devout. Hassan doesn't become more devout. The only people that again have to change are the women. But I like that the reason for her, such a drastic change for her, was because of sacrifice, was because of love, was because of her having a close relationship with her God. And I was just like, I know this because I've seen my mother do the same prayer. You know, my mom was a prayer warrior, and like I grew up in the church, and again, like I'm familiar with seeing like women kneeling down and saying, God, like if you do this, if you save this family member, if you heal, I'm gonna do this. And so talk to me about making that part of her change, and I think about making it about love rather than just her. Just that her moving there changed her. It was not she changed because she moved. She changed because of love. So talk to me about that.
I mean, I don't know why she changed. For me, there's a little bit of or why anyone changes, right? But there's usually something, and so for me, it's a bit of a reflection on an imagining, a fantasy of like maybe it was this because maybe this was hard, and. I think about my own life and changes that I've made that I never thought would change. And it's like, oh yeah, they've changed. Mm-hmm. And what did it for me? And sometimes it's like extreme circumstances. And that change helps you be a better person. And so the idea of, for me, it's a maybe. It's like maybe this happened. Mm-hmm. I don't know. But the idea of maybe that happening and her making a promise to the divine is really beautiful, and I find it really healing, and it gives me a sense of peace of, yeah, that makes sense, and maybe I would do the same thing. Mm-hmm. We don't, and there's something, I reflect a lot on like, I don't really know. Mm-hmm. None of us really know what we do in any of these circumstances until we're in them. Mm-hmm. And there is this like stereotype, I think, in the West that everything here is better, and then if you're here, why wouldn't you be X kind of person? But why wouldn't we be Y kind of person or F kind of person? So I don't know. I find there to be a sense. I find it really beautiful to think of, whether it's someone like my mother or someone else, like in an extreme circumstance where they have no choice. Like maybe they do turn to God and make a promise, and when the promise, when the thing they ask for comes true, then they submit. And I think there's also something about like, what does it mean to submit? Submission, I think I grew up thinking that submission was a bad thing. And it's such a centerpiece of like, Islam, but like lots of things. Like in order to commit, you have to submit to something. Whether it means I'm going to, I want to have a 6-pack, then that means you have to not eat certain foods and you have to live a certain kind of lifestyle. That's a commitment and a submission. And also I think about submission in terms of like, I'm submitting to submit to love is also to let go of ego. Like there's an ego that has to die for you to really submit. And letting go of ego and letting the ego die, I think, is the greatest thing we can do.
Yeah, change is hard, but it's necessary. Like there's a scene that I thought, the more I thought about it, I was like, isn't a bad thing where Azra arrives and the first she tells Miriam, what can I do for you? Tell me what to do. And all Miriam says is, just go change your clothes. Just change. And Azra took that in the wrong way. She took that as an insult, as if her mother like just being like displeased with her. But I'm
this is against me.
Yeah, she's like, this is against me. But I was just like, but it's such a simple request.
Just I know, and that's so interesting.
And it was like, but why you? Yeah. I'm like, just go. First of all, you just came off of a 24-hour flight. You shouldn't be changing your clothes. But her mom didn't. Her mom was just change your clothes. That's all you need to do. But she took it as her mom as a front, and her mom saying, why don't you change who you are as a person? But I'm like. But then again, change again, as you're saying, it's change. It's about change is good.
That's so
sometimes we don't like being told to change, but it's what we got to do.
I love that as an observation, and it is simple, and it is annoying, but it is simple, and it might be layered, but also it's not that complicated.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that you felt that and received that.
Yeah, I was just like, girl, just go change your clothes. Don't make it a fight. Don't make it a fight. But again, thank you so much, Fawzia, for talking with me and for sharing with me.
Thank you so much for watching the film, like 2.5. I love that you were like.
I did have to make my notes. I had to make my notes.
That means so much. Oh,
Thank
it's
you.
just such a great conversation.
Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Really, truly.
Yeah.